Hi, I'm David Shultz, the founder of Serif. We're an independent design and marketing communication firm. Last year was my first SANS conference, and it was such an amazing experience. And if you were there in Las Vegas, you probably heard our brilliant Cisco clients speak, Jeannie and Noel. We learned from them all the time, and it was really an incredible experience. Oh, there we go. So jump ahead. The people in this room have this amazing array of companies that all have really, really sophisticated marketing arms that figure out how to sell products or software or things like that. And they use really sophisticated, great tools. They get incredible investments from management and things. They'll use a funnel to talk about where people are in the buying decision process. They'll use personas to look at personalities and backgrounds and demographics and all the things to break down and really understand their target audience. Focus groups, like somebody was asking about earlier. All of those things, the real advantage that the marketing teams have over the people in this room is that their products are designed to meet a customer need or demand. So it's inherently something that the customer wants. The connection between the ask and the customer benefit is really tight. The people in this room have a little bit of a different challenge. Our audiences are not always super excited to see us coming. They oftentimes look at the ask that we have and view it as something that actually benefits the company. Can you do this to protect company X, or I guess not X, B? And so there's a disconnect there between the ask and the customer benefit, and we struggle with that. And I think that's really important to understand, like Erica was saying, where is our audience at? And we study that even more deeply and look at all of them and say, our audience is tired, they're stressed out. Just modern life is complex. You've got family and work and texts and emails and all that stuff. They're not inherently interested in cybersecurity. And even, it's not only that they don't see a clear benefit for themselves, they actually see it as a detriment, that it's slowing down their productivity. MFA and password managers and VPNs and things are just a drag because it slows them down, keeps them from getting to the 1,000 of other things that are on their plates. And then training. I wish that when our audience was out there and the training arrives, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I can't wait to absorb this information and apply it to my daily life and make it a lifelong habit. But it's not. They all look at it and go, how do I check this box? How do I move through this? Can I game this system in some way? Can I watch TV while I do this? Could I do multitask? How do we get through it? So we know that we have a lot of challenges that we're struggling with in addressing this audience. So marketing gets to sell things that people want, like ice cream, things with tangible benefits. If I eat this ice cream, my brain will be flooded with endorphins and I will be super happy. Our challenge is that the things that we're selling are sort of intangible threats. If I do this bad thing, something bad might happen or could happen, but probably won't, never has before. If our company gets hacked, that would be bad, but we'll probably survive. It's a challenge. So if marketing is getting to sell ice cream, the people in this room are selling something that's a little bit more like dental floss. You need it. It protects you. It's not very exciting, even if it's minty. But you have to have it. And you could argue that selling dental floss is actually easier than what you all do, because dental floss has really clear benefits. Protects against gum disease and bad breath. If you use it, you'll get better dates, you'll have better relationships and a better life. If you adopt better cybersecurity habits, you are not going to get more dates. It's not going to be a promotion. You're not going to get a raise. And so companies are very, very, very scared about breaches. Employees just don't have that same sense of urgency. And that's a big struggle for us. So when our firm comes in, we tend to do awareness communications and things at the beginning. And I really, really agree with what Erica said about needing to make it very easy and make it accessible, and motivation is only one core of it. But we come in, our first task is generally, how do we just break through and capture attention? Everybody's getting so many emails and so many texts and ads and posters, all the things that are in the world. how can we just get their attention for just a minute? And then once you get that precious moment when they look at you, how can we translate that into motivating different behavior? And there's other parts of it that obviously people in this room have to do and carry forward, but this is often where we start. And while this talk mainly focuses on motivation, I'll have 2 slides on capturing attention. And I think because the main thing we look at in trying to capture attention is just how do you be unexpected? And I think we've all seen the stereotypical images in the industry, the hacker in the hoodie and the Minority Report transparent interfaces and the matrix-like reigns of data and things like that. They have real communication value. People immediately know what you're talking about and things like that, but they tend to blend into the noise of everything else because we've all seen them so much. I was thrilled to see way less of this at RSA this year. So if you were here last year, you might have seen that at Cisco, we did these monsters to represent the threats. The main thing was that they have stopping power in a corporate environment because they were unexpected. They weren't something you were expecting to see. And there was a great situation with a big cutout. An executive took it to another part of the building, and his team started a hashtag Bring Our Monster Back campaign. And we knew that we had sort of bled into their culture. And it's just been this amazing thing that's sort of taken off on its own and lasted longer than we ever thought it would. But the rest of the talk is really focused on motivation. And we've identified 7 different strategies for motivation. That's not to say that this is the end-all be-all list. People in this room will probably think of others, and I would love to talk to you after about this and add to this number and think about it. These are case studies that are not work that our firm did. When we started engaging in this industry, we said, this idea of behavior change is not new. Other people have tried to crack this nut, and what can we learn from what they've done? So the first motivation that gets used so much is fear. It's incredibly powerful. It's where people go right off the bat, in terms of this is terrifying, very scary stuff. That Tim's talk is terrifying. But fear can be a little amorphous. It's hard, it's not as personal. And I think a lot of people think about it as people breaking into that box over there or breaking into that server. Obviously, identity theft and things are very personal. But if you want to take fear and make it much more personal, shame is a much more personal form of fear. This is a poster from World War II showing just consequences from letting the bad guy in. And so somebody talked and the ship was sunk. There's other posters that were loose lips sink ships. You have to say that slowly. And boy, now you've got your team looking at you. Everybody's blaming you. That is a whole other kind of fear, and it's very, very personal and can be really compelling. We look at those 2, the first 2, sort of the negative motivations, as incredibly useful, and they definitely have a role. But we like to think of them a little bit more as spice or chili or seasonings, not the main course. A little goes a long way. It has a role to play, but we don't want to lean into that completely because they tend to repel people a little bit. And we want to draw people into our cause and get them on our team. So if you want to do that, the word empathy has come up several times in this discussion already. And for those of you not in the United States, this is Smokey Bear, oftentimes called Smokey the Bear. And it is a campaign from the US Forestry Service to prevent wildfires. And started back in 1944. It's the longest running campaign in the US for public service like this. And it uses empathy in that you don't want to burn down Smokey's home. Look at his cute eyes, and he's just so sweet. And Smokey, there's another nuance to this campaign that's really interesting for our standpoint of, he says in this James Earl Jones voice, only you can prevent wildfires. And that only you is so important, right? It's how do you get personal responsibility out of this audience? Because everybody thinks cybersecurity is somebody else's job. Everybody thinks the hardware and software will protect them. And we know from stats that most of these breaches are human. Very interestingly, in the history of the US Forest Service, they started with fear. Back in the 20s, they had posters that had wolves made of flames and really terrifying images. And so you can look at their own work to see how they've evolved their message over time. In the 1950s, a little bear cub was actually burned in a fire, forest fire in New Mexico, and it was rescued. And they brought it and nursed it back to health, and its little paws were all wrapped up. It was awful. And it personified Smokey in a way that really connected with everybody and went viral in the way that things would go viral in 1950, but gave a real character that represented Smokey and made him even more powerful. They credit this campaign with reducing forest fires, particularly in that 50, 60 zones, reducing them by like 40,000 a year. These are wildfires started by people. So incredibly effective. Obviously, climate change has affected that, but an incredible campaign. But you can look at this campaign and say, our corporate culture, that's a little, empathy's a little touchy-feely for us. We're a, get up and go company. We want to do something more aggressive. So another way to look at it is fun. How can you make this entertaining? And Virgin Atlantic took the safety video that you've all seen, or safety presentation you've all seen 1,000 times with the vest and the mask and all that stuff. And they set it to music, and they hired a movie director, John M. Chu, and they brought in dancers from So You Think You Can Dance. And it was the exact same content, but repackaged. And suddenly this video went out on YouTube, and like 6 million people watched it right away in a fairly short period of time. So now you've taken this very boring security information, and you've made it so entertaining that people would seek it out and go find it, as opposed to having it forced down their throat. They'll forward it to their friends. They'll even watch it twice. Incredible case study. And other airlines have picked it up. I mean, Southwest is always funny. The people always have great character to how they present things. Air New Zealand did a Hobbit-themed one and a Betty White one. Who doesn't love Betty White? And so it's just an interesting thing in how you can repackage it, you can make it fun, make it more interesting. But fun, some companies would look at this and go, what? That looks like a big production, and we don't have anywhere near the budget to hire So You Think You Can Dance dancers. But it doesn't have to be that. Fun can mean just distilling something down. The Australian Cancer Council, Australia gets a ton of sun. The real problem with skin cancer. And the Australian Cancer Council started a campaign with Sid the Seagull and this very simple message of slip, slop, slap. Slip on some clothes, slop on a hat, and slap on some suntan lotion. Really simple, really catchy. Sid tap danced into the homes and hearts of Australia and has been, was a big campaign for a long time. And by some measures, how do you measure metrics here exactly? But reduced the incidence of melanoma by up to 50% for certain age groups that grew up with SID. Interestingly, in 2010, they tried to sort of reinvigorate the campaign, but a committee got involved. And so they added slide on some sunglasses and seek shade. So now it's slip, slop, slap, slide, shade. Too much. And it just goes, it didn't have the same effect. And I saw a quote from a guy named Sun Yi on Instagram recently that said, marketing is saying one thing 100 times. It's not saying 100 things once. And I think that's, how do you distill the messages down, make them actionable, like Erica was saying, and keep it very simple and talk about what you really need to move. And I think when we started working with Cisco, it was about distilling down the pages and pages of content to something that was actionable. So you might look at that and say, that's a little bit too fun. This is a serious topic. Team spirit is a way to build on how people work as a community and having this caring for your community. Texas, for those of you that aren't as terribly familiar with Texas, is the largest state in the continental United States, or the southernmost state. It is like its own country. They would like to be their own country, I believe. They had a problem in the 70s with just a lot of waste and litter and things like that. And a tiny little agency in Austin was tasked with solving this problem. And they came up with this idea. It was GDS&M, or GSD&M. And they came up with this campaign that plays on the double meaning of the word mess, in terms of mess as in litter, but also don't mess with us, we're Texas. And it was just incredible. They used Texas celebrities, Willie Nelson and things to push this forward. by some measures, it reduced highway litter and things by like 72%, incredibly effective because it played on their pride. It played on their, and Texas has incredible pride about Texas. And so that people are looking at it and say it's all for one for all, that's sort of a collective idea. And that can be a really interesting motivator as well. There's actually research around team spirit and caring about other people. Adam Grant, who is a psychological scientist that many of you may be familiar with, he's written amazing books and podcasts and things like that, was going to the hospital for the birth of his first daughter. And much like a lot of people, I guess Adam does not stop working because he's sitting there in the hospital and he's studying the hand washing stations. And so many of these behavior change campaigns are related to health that we can learn from. But he's studying the hand washing stations, and the sign says, good hand hygiene protects you from disease. And he sort of started questioning that approach. And so with a research assistant, David Hoffman from UNC, they divided all the hand washing stations into two signs. And one said, good hand washing hygiene protects you from disease. And the other said, good hand washing hygiene protects your patients from disease. What do you think was more effective? Patience. It ended up being patience. And Adam theorized that that was in part due to the illusion of invulnerability, that we all believe that we are Superman and that we're not going to get sick, we're not going to get hacked, and it's something we sort of have to pierce. You'd like to also believe that people care about their common man, and maybe that's true. But that research and looking at that in terms of it increased the soap usage at those stations by like 30%. It increased hand washing by 10%, real metrics. And so that, as we were thinking about these motivation topics, we had been thinking about self and self-preservation. And we're like, well, maybe that sort of invalidates that. Maybe that's not one. But one of the things we've looked at is going all the way back to that sense that the employees don't see a benefit for themselves in this material. And so we've kind of looked at, in some of our work, the positioning of how we phrase this ask. Do we phrase it as, dear employee, can you do this to protect company B? Can you do this favor for us? Is there a way to switch that? Can you present that differently and say, dear employee, here's a package of materials and resources and training that you can take home. Take it home and share it with your children, teach your family how to protect themselves, share it with your parents. And then suddenly that's the company providing a benefit instead of asking for a favor. Oftentimes the content is sort of like the Virgin Atlantic example. The content is exactly the same. If you're getting them to adopt good habits at home, that will bleed over to work. A lot of the things you're teaching are very similar, except for maybe data classification or something like that. So I think you can look at how we phrase it and what we do and how we use the intermingling of our digital lives between work and personal as a part of our communications and thinking about where the employees are. Another, and the last one in this second, is competition. And it's very human nature. We're incredibly competitive. And companies like Peloton and Strava have done incredible jobs of translating data and metrics into motivating factors. You can be part of a team that competes against another team. You can compete against other individuals. You can compete against yourself and your past performance. So many training programs in this area use gamification, trying to figure out how to take training and turning it into a video game or an escape room or some way to make it more engaging. What if we take that one step further and take scores from those and create leaderboards and feed competition? It could be very, very motivating. We had a potential client say recently, but that's not our corporate culture. We would never pit our people against each other. And I think that's a valid way to look at that. Everything has to be viewed through that lens of culture. But competition doesn't necessarily have to mean pitting people against each other. The potato chip company Lay's hired an agency, it was BBD&O and the marketing arm, to come up with a new campaign for how to promote potato chips. You're gonna see how I connect this to cybersecurity. They started a campaign. They wanted to reach young people. It was very focused on social media, called Do Us a Flavor. So they asked people to submit things to get them invested in what would be another good flavor for Lay's. And they have a huge range of flavors already. They hoped to get like 1 million submissions, but they ended up getting 3.8 million in the first year. It was incredibly popular. The beauty of it is that the people submitting, the people that are thinking about this, are now sort of invested in Lay's product development and Lay's marketing. They have to stop and look at, well, what are all the flavors of Lay's? What are these teams, what do I have to work with? And then you could submit your flavor online and sriracha, I want it to be sriracha. And they would send you a little mock-up of your package, and so it was very engaging. But yeah, it's beautiful because they've drawn people into this to think about, well, what would I do if I was in this situation, or what flavor would I push for? So incredible response. They do it every year now. The winner gets like $1 million and they make the flavor. But it's interesting because it's a competition, but it's investing people in your cause. So those are the 7, presented very high level. And now the task for the people in the room is, how do you choose? How do you choose the right approach for your team? What do you use? Is it a carrot or a stick? Do you use fear? Do you use something that draws people in? And it really comes down to culture. That's the deciding factor. If you have a hard-driving, sales-oriented culture, they're already super competitive. Maybe competition is a great tool to use to engage them. If you have a warmer, hey, our team's really tight, it's more of a community or a family, and then team spirit might be more effective. You can talk about how they play off of protecting everyone around them. If you have a really young culture or something like that, you might want to do more fun or entertainment and think about how to use that. There's a trick, though, that this probably isn't a one-size-fits-all. Our audiences are not monolithic, and there's an incredible amount of difference between the people that we're talking to. If you send out one email that goes out to the whole company, you're immediately going to lose a section of people at the top that either know everything already or think they do. The engineers and people like that, they're going to look at your email and go, I know all that, I'm going to ignore it, it's too rudimentary for me. And then you'll have another whole strata of people at the other end of the spectrum that are maybe new employees or daunted by technology, who will look at it and be daunted by the email and ignore it. I'll just set that aside, I don't know what that's talking about, it's confusing. So trying to reach everybody with one message is really tough, and it actually dilutes the impact. So if you can look at segmenting and breaking up your audience, and it may be that you break it up by different motivating strategies, that you use different things for different teams, but you've got to look at how people are interacting with technology. You have people that are working in front of computers all day, but then you got people in a factory, you got people in the field. They all are interacting with your digital universe in different ways. So can you segment that down? And then the more you can segment, it takes more work. You know, you've got to create different versions of things. You've got to probably create personas and think about how these people interact with things. But you know, you've got different languages, you've got different regions, you've got different levels of knowledge, you've got experts and novices and all these different things. So being able to break that down makes a big difference. So then the last thing the last sort of message is this sense of, as you look at all these campaigns, and after last year's conference, a lot of people say, wow, that just all looks super expensive. And we don't have management buy-in, we don't have the kind of budgets to do that. And I just want to really stress that the idea of being unexpected and doing these kind of things, the expense is not in the idea, it's in production value. A big budget lets you hire a bigger film crew or shoot in more locations or do more animation or all the things that are sort of production. But the base idea can be really effective, and you can find creative ways to implement it. So one of my absolute favorite case studies is the Fearless Girl, which probably a lot of people are familiar with. There's a company called State Street Investors. It's a financial company, and they hired McCann Erickson to promote a fund they were creating. They had a lot of data that said that companies that had women in leadership positions perform better financially. to no one's great shock. And so they wanted to create a fund that would allow people to invest on that philosophy. And I can imagine being at McCann and starting out the brainstorms for this. How are we going to promote this? Well, let's do a series of ads featuring really powerful women in business, and that'll be amazing because we'll make them into heroes, and people will do that. But ads and media and everything is really expensive. Going out and photographing all these big executives is hard, and logistics, and it's expensive. So they didn't go that route, and somebody came up with this really very simple idea. They put this bronze statue of a fearless girl with her hands on her hips, staring down this big bronze statue of the bull. And that bull is on Wall Street in the financial district in New York, very famous, bulls and bears, the stock market. It's in front of the stock exchange. And the only promotion they did, the only media they did at all was put one video on the Wall Street Journal website. It just caught fire. So in the first 24 hours, they had something like 1 billion tweets or X's. And it went on, and even the sculptor of the original bull was really mad, and so he raised a big fuss because this is impugning his art, and that just fed the fire. And so by the end of the base run of this campaign, they felt like that they had gotten about $7.5 million of free advertising from this statue and from the tourists taking pictures with it and from the social post. So I think it's finding not only unexpected messages, but maybe unexpected ways to deliver it. When we started the Monsters, we sort of put them in refrigerators around the break rooms and things like that to see, can we just break out and have something be in an unexpected methodology? So really interesting, compelling ways to do that. So as I wrap, there's really breaking back down to 3 things, using the unexpected to just break through the noise. That's such a big hurdle if you don't get through the noise. There's a really great quote from Jay Chiat, who founded Chiat Day, the big ad agency, that said, unforgivably bad is better than forgettable. Forgettable is unforgivable. And it's such a beautiful quote because, no matter what kind of effort you put into your communications, if it's forgettable, if it flows into the mix, all of the money is wasted. You have to find some way to break people out. I often say if nobody pushes back on your idea for your campaign, it's probably not aggressive enough. And it's more likely to fold into the flow and be ignored. And then let culture drive your motivation. Think about who you're talking to and adjust your motivational strategies to speak to those people. And if you can, segment down and find smaller segments so you can really speak to people where they're at, like Erica said. It's really a critical driver. So with that, I've got a few minutes left, and we did create a URL for those of you scared of QR codes. We have some things on our website, some additional resources and sources if you want to go see the history of Smokey, or you want to watch the Virgin Atlantic video or any of those things. There's more resources there. And but with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. All right, for those in the room, please raise your hand if you have a question. But I do have a question in Slack to start us off from Lisa. Going back to what you said with some of your motivations, one of your motivation, it was like, please protect our company. It was almost that team spirit, right? And then you switched to, okay, but if that doesn't work, take it home to your family itself, right? She was focused on how can you highlight vulnerabilities with that self, because she was, sorry, it's a really long message, but basically her question was like, how can you bring the significance of invulnerabilities of the company if you're trying to put it through the lens of self?
And I think, okay, that's really interesting. I think that positioning it for that isn't necessarily a cure-all. It's not that you can replace all of your internal communications with a campaign that's driven towards your home and your family. I think we looked at that as more of an add-on or a way that you can shift it and say that, these are resources we're giving you, that you're viewed as a little bit less asking for a favor and more giving favors, but it still has to be tied into corporate communications. And I think, in terms of highlighting the threats, it's really a matter of, we're already looking at the threats and the dangers, and they're just in the news every day. People are aware of the risks, and I think they're very scared for their family. And so ways that you can arm them to protect them is sort of just ends up being a benefit that you can add on. It can't really supplant. Companies have more specific needs in terms of data classification and things like that that can't be entirely done. But I think we're looking at more creating a more holistic culture that expands beyond the workplace, because the workplace and the home place are increasingly sort of intertwined with working from home and the way our bring your own devices and other computers and things are working. So it's just blending the two. It's not necessarily one or the other.
David, quick question. You rated the motivations 1 through 7. Is that because 7's more important than 1, or is there a particular reason you put them in that order?
There is no significance to the numbers whatsoever. No, I think we started with the fear and things like that because, one, they're kind of a reflexive way to go, and they've been very commonly used. But I think that we view them in sort of those two bodies of negative and positive, and we feel like they both have roles and they both have mixes. But yeah, there isn't any predetermined, if one doesn't work, you should go to 2. It's much more about who are your people, who are you talking to, and where are their brains at right now, and how can you speak to their individual circumstances.
Okay, I think that's it for today. Can we get one more big round of applause for David?